Welcome to Voices,
a podcast from the Institute for Human Rights and Business.
Here, we're seeking to elevate the range of perspectives
on the role of business in the world
and in people's everyday lives.
Hello, everybody. My name is Francesca Fairbairn, and I work for the Institute for Human Rights and Business. And today, I'm talking to Francesca Mangano, who is the CSR and Sustainability Executive for TFG London. Hello, Francesca.
Hello, Francesca, and thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. So I'm talking today to Francesca about a just released guidance written by the UN Global Compact for due diligence for crew change for charterers. So IHRB has done a lot of podcasts and work around the crew change issue, which has been a result of the COVID crisis starting in March 2020, when at some point anything up to 400,000 seafarers on board cargo ships and bulk carriers been stuck on board ships for longer than their contract because certain countries have closed their ports for crew change in order to avoid risk spreading COVID from seafarers into their towns. So this has resulted in seafarers sometimes being stuck on board up to a year beyond their original contract, which if their original contracts had been a year, that's nearly 2 years, which is a year more than is the upper limit in the Maritime Labour Convention. And one of the worst things about it is these seafarers don't even know when they might be able to go home. The number at its peak was about 400,000. I think it's estimated to be about 200,000 now, but it's very difficult to tell. And also, however many are stuck at sea, there's the equivalent number of professional seafarers who are unable to join the ships and therefore work. So Francesca, the reason that we are talking to TFG is because they have done a case study in this UN Global Compact crew change guidance. So Francesca, if you'd like to say a little bit about TFG to begin with, for those who might not have heard of it, that'd be really helpful.
Of course. So TFG London is part of the Foschini Group, which is a leading South African retailer. And under the Foschini Group South Africa, there is obviously TFG brand, TFG London brand with 5 recognized UK leading brand. Probably the ones that are most known are Hobbs, Whistles and Phase 8. Just
for those who might not know, those are female fashion retailers, is that
correct? Right? Yes. And similar businesses are supply chains for both retail and manufacturing are distributed across roughly 20 countries globally, with our top 10 sourcing countries being, China, Europe, Turkey, and Southeast Asia. Right. So our supply chains are very conventional.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So one of the most interesting things about the case study in the crew change guidance is that you talk about your journey becoming more aware of your supply chain, of the shipping part of your supply chain, and how you developed a response to the crew change crisis. So perhaps you could just walk us through how TFG London created its steps to due diligence in this area.
Yeah, so I think it was during the first UK lockdown. So we're talking about April time, that a multi-stakeholder initiative of which we are members of hosted a webinar in collaboration with ITF.
ITF being the International Transport Workers Federation, which represents seafarers globally and has done a lot of work trying to get seafarers home and on board vessels, isn't that right?
Yeah. And so the scope of this webinar was to highlight the issues of hundreds of thousands of seafarers that were stranded at sea, during the pandemic, but also, this was an issue that was happening prior to the pandemic happening. And I was sitting there hearing the facts, and it was really hard not to be moved by the sheer scale of the crisis. And we know that under the Maritime Labour Convention, seafarers should stay at sea for no more than 11 months. And here we are hearing human beings stranded at sea for 17 or up to 19 months without being able to be repatriated. So as a business, we depend on a stable and functioning logistics sector. And it dawned on us that suddenly such key part of our supply chain was so hidden. We had no mapping in place. And now it was also in the midst of a humanitarian crisis, as the ILO calls it. And so with complete lack of understanding of, and also from lack of coordination from governments that also had ratified the Maritime Labour Convention to take actions on this, we felt compelled to act, even if we are not like the huge multinational that has, the ability to have large leverage to bring about change. So this is how the journey started. It was a bit of an earthquake. And so we had to, when we embarked on this task of trying to put together the pieces of this puzzle, the main challenge we faced, there was this segment of our global supply chain that wasn't familiar to us. We had no visibility. And our main mapping focus has always been on merchandise suppliers, from manufacturing units to raw material sourcing. So our logistic partners were never part of this map, and then the routes that the vessels were taking. So the first step that we felt was the right thing to do was to present the issue to the board of directors. That gave us the opportunity to start the investigation. And we also wanted to understand how much our transport partners knew about existing policies, framework, protocols that were available and existing already there. And so we proceeded with sharing with our partners the IMO protocols in terms of for seafarers to join a ship, but also to leave a ship and then being able to be repatriated. So that was the first step.
And just to clarify for those who may not be as familiar with the maritime industry, so the IMO industry recommended framework of protocols, goals that shipping companies and their customers should follow in order to assist crew change. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. And so once we sort of put the foundation out there with existing policies, we then needed to understand which vessels were carrying our goods and which routes they were taking and when. So we requested that our partners provide a nearest to sort of detailed map of our logistic network at sea, and then ask them about what actions they were taking to support the IMO protocols. And our logistic partners then came back with a map that was outlining sort of all these global logistic routes vessels from the 1st of January, which is pretty much when the pandemic started, to when we started the investigation, which was around the beginning of June. Mm-hmm. So the data that came back was completely unfamiliar to us. We didn't understand what we were reading. So we had to approach experts like the International Transport Workers Federation to help us understand the data and also to verify whether within this time frame there had been any human rights infringements perpetrated on board of these vessels that were listed on the map. And the ITF compared this data with the records that they had in-house and found that approximately 5 of the vessels that were carrying our cargo were companies were roaming the oceans without an ITF agreement, which was quite scary for us to understand because at least 5 of these vessels, we didn't have any visibility of what was happening on board.
Right.
And so when we were presented with this data from ITF, we felt powerless to act because we didn't have any meaningful tools or leverage to respond to our crisis. As I said, we are not a multinational that, has huge volumes and is able to exercise that influence on governments, on supply chains, on partners, etc. So we didn't know, for instance, where those vessels were transporting cargoes. by which organizations, where we could potentially forge meaningful collaborations.
So obviously, because you've got consumer goods, they are containers on container ships, and there are tens of thousands of other containers on the ship. So you don't know whose goods are in the other containers. You don't know who you can partner with. Not like a charterer, which might charter a whole or large part of a vessel to transport bulk, say kind of coffee or oil or etc.
That's right.
Yes.
And so we, in addition to that, all the other issues we had in supply chains, we always, look at task support from multi-stakeholder initiatives. And in this case, we were lacking all of the usual conventional routes where we would have, that we would have taken if this was happening in our land supply chains or our manufacturing supply chains. And so the only thing that we could do as a quick win was to request that our shipping agents agreed to accept the Maritime Labour Convention and to cascade it down to their partners, accept the IMO industry recommended framework of protocols, and liaise exclusively with partners of ITF so that at least we could retain some verifiable data access.
Right.
But it was clear to us that we couldn't continue to do this work solo, so we approached the multi-stakeholder initiative that we are members of, and we asked whether they could establish a members working group like they had done in the past for other salient issues, but specifically for the seafarers crisis, as well as establishing an expert support network. Because of course, sharing knowledge is one thing, but also accessing the support that you need from the experts is vital. And finally, we requested whether the supports network could start working on a tool or a framework which could then support members in applying the due diligence to address the crew change crisis. So when then the UNGC started working on this tool, and we were approached to provide feedback on it, we were delighted to see it, that something actually was coming to place. And today we obviously welcome this tool as an important guidance, which I believe is set to obviously drive change in the sector and hopefully enhance the way that businesses look at human rights due diligence in the logistics sphere and specifically at sea.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, one of the most interesting things about your journey and the honesty in which you described TFG London's journey is that you didn't have any visibility of that section of your supply chain, and the kind of describing the process that you went through as a company to get visibility and to start to get some kind of handle on how you, as a obviously not a large multinational corporation, can make a difference. And obviously as well, working in a multi-stakeholder initiative, that increases your leverage because you're working with others to amplify your voice. I hope that this guidance has huge take-up and that it also leads companies on, opens the eyes of those who aren't aware thus far or don't have visibility of their shipping to date, and that they use this as an opportunity to do longer term and wider, more comprehensive human rights due diligence in their supply chains. I wonder if you could just tell me finally, Francesca, what TFG London would like to see other companies doing, and if you see any scope for more collective action by brands in discussion with ship operators.
I think, as I said before, absolutely there is this huge opportunity for brands to collaborate together, from small scale retailers like us to, big, learning from big corporations that perhaps are doing more in this sphere. But I think that as businesses, we have a huge responsibility towards ensuring that, there is an application of human rights in the logistics supply chain as well. And we play an important role in sustainably transforming seafarers' lives. And although obviously there is this joint reaction from different governments, I think on different levels, I think every business has the opportunity through multi-stakeholder initiative engagement or engaging with NGOs on the ground to actually influence governments to make this change and really apply a robust legislative infrastructure to protect workers' rights. After all, we benefit from and we are contributing to global economies as, big or small retailers wherever we operate. So we have a responsibility as a business, but also we have a weight that we can apply on, sustaining change in this field. So I think there is a huge opportunity, and I would welcome more brands to become transparent in sharing the issues. I mean, for us, it was very challenging to suddenly admit, actually, we have this gray area in our supply chains that we haven't explored because it's never been like the conventional route to actually explore this kind of supply chains. But I think that admitting that you have a problem and getting together to actually resolve it, this is when biggest leaps can be done in improving human rights and labor standards in supply chains.
Yes, and I congratulate TFG London enormously on its honesty, and it's a proper leading by example for other brands, big or small. I see that there was something in the news last week that certain countries have started to close their ports again to particular nationalities of seafarers. So I hope that doesn't mean a upturn again in the number of stranded seafarers. But in the meantime, thank you so much for talking to me, Francesca, and best of luck to TFG in London in its continued human rights due diligence journey.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.